Hello and welcome to My Security TV and our Tech and Sec Weekly. My name's Chris Cubbage. I'm the editor with My Security Media, and this is our 2022 State of Cybersecurity with ISACA. Last year we did at least two parts with ISACA on these annual research reports, looking at the global update on workforce efforts, resources and cyber operations. We're going to be joined by Jenai Marinkovic, who is with the Emerging Trends Working Group, and Jonathan Brandt, also there in the US. So let's be joined now by Jenai and Jonathan. Thanks very much for joining us.
Howdy.
Great.
Thanks, Chris.
We were just talking, we did two parts last year on the report, and there's a lot to unpack here. So we're just going to be a sort of an open discussion. We might start with you, Jenai, if you can, maybe the background on the report and how it's structured. I think, Jonathan, you were also the lead on this, so but we'll go with Jenai just in courtesy because I've already said it.
Actually, Jonathan, if you wanted to take that, since you're the brains behind the design.
Go on.
Sure
I was thinking alive there. So, John, yeah, maybe the background to the report and some of the linkages to 2021 as well.
Absolutely. So, as you already called out to your viewers, ISACA did choose to do a single report this year, and truly, in years past, the workforce report has really gotten a lot of traction here, and we felt like going to one report, recognizing that some data points really kind of stayed consistent with prior years, but allowed us to do a better job of cross-connecting data points that would historically be in two separate reports. So a report went out in Q4 of 2021. Per usual, reports, results closed, and in what you see and what we're going to step through is a result of that. I would just like to highlight, like when we met with you last year, we were eager to kind of see how the data points would continue to morph as the pandemic went on, and some of that I'm sure is going to be some talking points here today.
Well, you surveyed 2,000 or 2,031 to be precise professionals in the industry. Interestingly, you've highlighted this is one report this year versus the part one and part two. So I think this one does seem to have a bit more punch this year. I think maybe because of that, and it encapsulates sort of a whole range of different areas. Jenai, maybe some of the early standouts for you from this finding and the change there in the way that the report has been structured. What was some of the early sort of fallouts from you? It's and just for the audience, we'll have links into the show notes as well, and we'll walk through some of the key findings. But yeah, what was sort of the headline outcomes on a report like this?
Sure. So a couple of things. One is that we saw unfilled positions increase by 8 percentage points to 63%. That's significant. That 62% of our teams are understaffed. One of the big positives is we saw that only 52% of the companies are actually requiring a university degree for entry-level positions, so that's actually down 6%. And this one was tough. It's taking between 1 and 5 are saying that it's taking more than 6 months to find qualified people for positions. When we looked at things like soft skills, the top skills gaps completely were 54% in terms of soft skills, 52% cloud, and then 34% for security controls. Budgets are finally improving. So we're seeing that roughly 42% say that budgets are actually appropriately funding. But we're having problems retaining our people. And 60% are reporting that we're having difficulties retaining qualified people with a myriad of reasons, from being recruited to other companies, not being no financial incentives, or not the type of promotion opportunities, that they ultimately need. When we look at things like, what are the types of attacks that we're seeing, it's really interesting because we see social engineering attacks and advanced persistent threat, APT. So that's really interesting to me because I want to pick that apart a little bit later. And that we're also seeing an increase in the amount of attacks that companies are ultimately experiencing. A couple more things I'll point out. One is we are seeing an increase in organizations doing risk assessments, by an increase by 2%. And in terms of cyber maturity, 41% of the organizations are actually investing in analyzing the maturity of their organizations. And then when we start to look at the top 3 technological gaps, we're seeing cloud, we're seeing identity and access management, and we're seeing controls. Security controls is making its way for the first time. It's really important because when we look at identity and cloud, those are just 2 of the things that are necessary for transformation efforts. And so seeing that those are gaps that we have in our architecture is really interesting to see that kind of pop up. So those were some of the things that I noticed.
I think I'm going to bring a bit more of an Australian perspective here. Only 29% of the Australian New Zealand respondents say that their cybersecurity budgets are appropriately funded. So it looked like budgets are actually declining over here. A report from the Australian Institute of Company Directors just came out yesterday. Cybersecurity and data breaches is the top of mind for directors here, keeping them awake at night. And I quoted this report in my editorial for the Australian Cybersecurity magazine. It was on the back of the Australian Signals Director at the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, Department of Home Affairs here in Australia, government level recruitment. They're putting a lot of money. They want sort of hundreds and hundreds of people. So it's putting a lot of competition between government and private sector and the like for these skills. And then when you see a report like this, it was around the recruitment stage, right? We're up to 6 months to fill positions. And that cast my mind back to the privacy report that ISACA did last year. I spoke to Joe Stewart-Rattray on that, and they were finding similar results around those timeframes as well for privacy and cybersecurity. Those kind of roles do have alignment. John, just on what I was just saying there on the government and private sort of competition, was anything in this report on that? Of the competitive nature for these skills? There's clearly a skills shortage, and then it's how we're grappling with that, and maybe some of the strategies that you might be observing from the market on how they're sort of addressing this skills shortage.
So that's a great question. Truly, we kind of looked at the data as a sum of all parts and really didn't dive into the public versus public sector aspect of it. To your point, though, you talk about the Australian perspective, and it's certainly every region is almost a story in itself, depending on the data point. Jenai highlighted that yes, budgets the overall feeling of budgets it was positive, but if we look at the 7-year trend, it's been leveling. And so what comes to my mind, which I'd be, really curious to see what Jenai is seeing out in the market in her work, though, is that so the logical, the quick conclusion that comes to my mind here is 1 of 2 things is happening. One is that organizations they're getting accustomed to the fact that there's a glass ceiling on the budget, right? Which is very much one hypothesis. The other part of it is that as people continue to pursue zero trust strategies and transformations, there are some tangible business gains to be had there, especially when you're identifying a lot of duplicative technologies.
So what you're saying there is particularly the zero trust approach. It does create an uplift in security, that higher maturity. Does it require less sort of skill sets, smaller teams? Is there any particular trade-off there?
So I think from industry reporting that, in the white paper that we did not too long ago with our author, there is that I think that zero trust strategy allows you to better qualify and quantify what it is you need. Right. Because I think at the end of the day, up to now, and I think we talked about it last year, like this whole doom and gloom mentality, it's not helping any of us. Just to report on the skill shortage, that large number doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what we're doing to try to help make a difference and to scale some efforts to combat it.
So, because one of the findings was 36% indicate that their enterprises conduct the risk assessments. You mentioned that, Jenai, in terms of an increase in risk assessment. So they're getting the work done. Was there any decline in sort of the state of cybersecurity? The threat landscape's increased. We've got, a European war on and the like, with major sort of announcements coming out of CISA and the Five Eyes nations warning of cyber attacks, and particularly on critical infrastructure as well. So we've seen an uptick. Ransomware's less in the news this year, So, but the threat landscape hasn't changed, if not gotten potentially bigger. Was there any reduction in the feelings of their cyber maturity and cybersecurity sort of posture?
No, not the data didn't call out anything there. And actually, conversely, and I think Jenai probably is going to be, I know I scratch my head at the overconfidence of the respondents. With their reported ability to detect and mitigate cyber incidents seemed overly ambitious.
Okay.
Just on the surface of looking at the data. But Jenai, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, 80% felt that they were going to be comfortable in being able to detect security breaches, but you're understaffed, you're undertrained. I want to give credit where credit is due on risk assessments, but you're still like, oh, it's still a low number, and it's only happening annually. The number of attacks or the breaches are increasing, and the amount of time to detect is increasing. So with all of that, I struggle with understanding where this bravado is coming from, and it's to our detriment. So it's dangerous to think that way, and I don't know whether or not we're doing that. If people are giving those answers because this is a report, or whether or not they really believe it. But no, there's no way on the planet that 80% of the respondents are capable of detecting all security breaches within their environment.
Right.
So yeah.
And to piggyback on Jenai's point there, I think it was 82 is the official number, but 46% of them had a security staff less than 10. And that's why it really made you really kind of call into question the thing. But to be fair, right? Like you only know what you know, and that's part of the challenge here is this belief versus being data informed, and really having the visibility you need into your organization to truly to be able to make a sound conclusion, right, onto any of these questions.
Well, you mentioned that was 40-odd% with teams less than 10. There was another sort of one here, 44% of the respondents managed security staff with less than 3 years of work experience as well. So that team might be small, but then there's also a percentage of that with limited experience as well and still learning on the job training. Do you know?
Yeah, for me, that number is low. You should have far more junior people within your organization, because let's go to the risk assessments. One of the issues is when we look at the barriers to why I'm not conducting risk assessments as frequently, it was that we don't have enough time, and we don't have people in place that can do that. Well, guess who is actually well positioned to do risk assessments? Junior people. In fact, it's an entrance point into the GRC, component of things. And so to have so few junior people who could be doing that work in a cost-effective way, to me is a problem. And then remember, when we do risk assessments, that should feed into all of the downstream processes, including the breaches. Because when a breach happens after you've done your after action, you should be feeding that right back into your risk assessment process and say, what did I miss? To me, it's like there's these opportunities. And when we start looking at the fact that we don't have as many junior people on teams that could be doing these risk assessments, which limit our downstream risk, is a problem. I'm going to be advocating heavily about bringing on junior people during this call because.
Well, I imagine most of our audience may well be those people, particularly either potential, transitions into the sector, or they're relatively new, or the CISOs and those doing the recruitment and the hiring going, I'm struggling to find the right person here. And these are where the value of these reports are, really, to kind of guide them. Some of the gaps in mitigation, we talked about university degrees and certifications. Is there a bit of a less, and there's been a lot of pressure on universities during COVID as well. They've lost a lot of students, particularly here in Australia. What's the sort of the trade-off between a university degree, a certification, and the on-the-job experience? Was there any change in there, or what were some of the findings?
No. So as to what's qualifies somebody as highly qualified remain pretty consistent with years past. I think the thing that we just need to be honest with ourselves here is, so we are a heavily credentialed industry. The greater IT industry, we're probably the most credentialed profession out there, right?
And you're definitely out front there, John, as well. I've always raised you're most qualified, most certified.
Yeah, well, you know what? There's an administrative financial burden starting to maintain this stuff too, unfortunately.
I can't fit. You could see the tile there. I can't fit any more on, so don't go getting any more certs.
I know. I'm starting to let some age off as I move up the chain.
Nice.
But a lot of credentials have experience requirements, right? So, and the credentials are traditionally are anchored in a job role. So this is one of the things that I'm really personally kind of invested in right now is there's a large challenge with how we describe the cyber workforce. And right, because it's not all heavily technical. And Jenai just brought up a good point. There are some very logical entry points in. So, the credentials will remain important because unfortunately, that's what the HR function knows. That's what talent management and talent recruiters know right now. University degrees did lose favor this year. ISACA in last year's report, we really advocated hard to expand your talent pipeline. So we pushed that in a multitude of avenues, from podcasts to art industry articles, our interviews with you. And it seems like at least the respondents to the survey, they took note, and that's a good thing. However, academia does serve a purpose. And I think where some of the ancillary reporting from ISACA's workforce development efforts, 2-year programs seem to be positioned probably the best out of anybody right now to survive the onslaught of attacks on academia. And truthfully, because we need to shorten the time to train to get people into the workforce. Yeah. Personally, I don't think 4-year degrees are just going to be very relevant to our profession within the next 5 years. It's just, we can't put people out there. And there used to be this thing, lifelong learning. Lifelong learning has already evolved. It's matured. Now it's about lifelong employability, which infers just-in-time training for what it is that you need to be highly adaptive. And so I think that, whatever the upskill and reskilling pipelines that are out there, we need to kind of keep that speed and agility and appropriateness need to come first and foremost. The other thing and it always comes up, and I'm starting to advocate a lot, is, and I'm equally guilty of it. We talk about entry-level positions. I really think that the vernacular, we need to change it and say new to the profession, because what we're seeing is a lot of people older in their career are coming over, and it just has to me, it's nuanced. However, it does matter, right, at the end of the day, because if you say new to the profession, we're basically not discounting any of their professional experience that very well may be relevant to the work.
Oh, look, it's got to be relevant. I think anyone doing a career transition, we've done a number of interviews with people transitioning into cybersecurity, from safety, from risk, and the like, and they pick it up very quickly. It's more the technical side. And again, I've you do some online training. The Azures and the AWSs have got a lot of free training there, or very low cost training, with good quality. And I was thinking, as you were talking, in terms of the training and the availability of training, we saw it during COVID, the online training sort of platforms, there's no shortage of training that can be done. So the quality of training is also improving during this period. I think it does put pressure on the universities to have, universities that tend to be more theory-based versus the practical applications and the applied security. So as long as they can do both, I think universities have adapted to that as well. So the degree structure is slightly different. Jenai?
It is. I'm the executive director for a new nonprofit, and we specialize in taking women, people of color, veterans, and people from socioeconomically disadvantaged communities and training them into GRC and cybersecurity careers, 6 to 7 months tuition free. And, when we looked at what is everything that somebody who is transitioning into this industry needs in order to be fit for purpose day one, to take work off of the plate of their future managers, what is all of that? And so we started to, deconstruct it and created this combination of an apprenticeship program and a formal education. And it was, it was really interesting because I thought, wow, 6-7 months, we're doing well. We're actually partnering with some communities, and they were saying, well, how can you do this faster? So after I lost it and said, what? I took a step back and said, all right, well, how do you do it? Where I'm going with this is that if you've got people saying, I need to get you cross-trained and moving from being a landscape architect into a GRC analyst in less than 6 months, then universities and boot camps and schools need to completely change the way that they get people ready. And here's a final thing that I'll say on it is that 2 years is a long time. And for people that are already resource constrained and stressed because of the pandemic and life on top of you, 2 years is a long time, but 6 months, they can grit it out. They can grind it out. And so that's what I'm seeing is that between, say, 5 and 6 months, they're, expecting to get people transition to the industry as quickly as possible.
And what are some of the, I'll say, I know I interviewed Jo Stewart-Rattray, as I mentioned, and she doesn't like the term soft skills. She prefers the human skills terminology. Soft skills and technical skills she pushed back on. But the human skill sets and what were some of the findings there? What makes a good cybersecurity professional and a good team player? Cybersecurity is a team sport. What were some of the findings on the human skills side of things? John,
I'm a little
maybe
bitter
you
about this one. John, if you want to start.
Sure. So right at the top, not surprising, communication, right, came up to the top. Critical thinking and problem solving. Those rounded out the top 3. And none of those are really surprising. And when we craft a survey question, it's this balance and act between forcing somebody to prioritize them versus give them, in this question, it was rate your top 5. So it was less ideal. Truthfully, I wanted them to be ranked, to force you to make a decision. But for this year, we wanted to break out soft skills. And I know Jo very well. I work with her on a lot of different projects. Love her near and dear. I think one of the things is we can push back all we want on certain terms, but the rest, I think as an industry, we sometimes try to reinvent the wheel. And I think that, to me, I'm not going to lose sleep over that particular thing right now. I think, human psychologists, right? The human psychology side of things, I let them kind of drive things on that. But I know Jenai is chomping at the bit here, on this because it threw me for a loop. So the bottom 2 soft skills, and again, we gave them I think it was about 12 different options, right? All different aspects of soft skills or human skills. And we did this purposely because we wanted to expand the aperture as to because those soft skills encompasses a lot, right? Yeah. And empathy and honesty ranked the bottom 2. And empathy, listen, as a protection-oriented profession, who our jobs are to support business leaders and help them basically make sound business decisions, it proves how far we have to go for it to be rated as low as it did. But it got worse because honesty was it was a couple percentage points up from that. 16% felt that honesty was important to their organization. When you look at other industry reports out there whereby people in our profession don't believe that their peers are telling the truth, even though they're required to, right? And to report on different incidents. And oh, by the way, we go back to this. We're a highly credentialed industry, and every one of the credentialing bodies has a code of ethics. And you know what it says in there? You're gonna do the right thing in the face of adversity, even if it means you're standing alone. So we really have a lot of work to do here. But I'm gonna turn it over to Jenai because I know she and I, we were really in our separate ways, we are really baffled by this.
Yeah, I lost my mind when I read it. It's like, they can't be, so honesty. John, you did a great job of diving into honesty. I want to dive into empathy. Empathy was the least rated human skill, that makes for a good cybersecurity professional, and that is insane. And there's a couple of reasons why it's insane. One is that our adversaries targeted us with two different types of attacks: social engineering attacks and APT. What is social engineering but the manipulation of, or the leveraging of empathy, understanding of the person whom you're going to attack, and then specifically crafting an attack that manipulates that person's emotions. So social engineering attacks require a level of empathy in order to be successful. APT, I'm getting into the environment. What am I doing? I am profiling and I am learning everything about that company, that company's culture, the way people move, what they think, what they feel, in order to be able to stay inside of an environment as long as possible. Guess what? That is empathy. So our attackers are exceptional at using empathy. Yeah. And so to me, if we're rating empathy as low as we are, that means that we are not empathetic. And so I actually went to some of the other statistics and looked at it. And if we look at our numbers, the majority of our workforce are Gen X and baby boomers. And the generation that is least represented is Gen Z. And the generation that was born with empathy, right? When we think about a generation that is most in tune with their empathy, it is Gen Z. They are not reflected in our workforce. And so to me, for us to say that empathy is a problem, is not a problem, and then to not hire people who are empathetic, but then to have attackers that leverage empathy-based attacks in order to get into our environment, there is a massive disconnect. And I think that that's because of bias. I think it's because we're a monoculture.
Well, that was specifically in the report. That's figure 23, top 5 soft skills. Communication at the top, critical thinking, problem solving, teamwork, attention to detail. And
How do you communicate with someone without being empathetic?
I was about to say, maybe there's too many, because you are right. It does stand out down the bottom. Right down the bottom is honesty and empathy, below writing skills. So look, I get it. In terms of the other ones here, the top 5 sort of technical skills are cloud computing, data protection. One thing I was going to highlight, figures 8, 9, and 10, in terms of what is in most demand, is still, though, the technical skills, right? So they're the ones that are they're struggling. If you've got technical skills or you want to get into the sector and guarantee yourself a role, it's the technical skills and also the prior hands-on cybersecurity experience, figure 13.
It's the technical skills, but if we look at what technical skills are in demand, it's a little bit different. If you start looking at things like that aren't in as much demand, what did we see? Penetration testing, vulnerability assessment, to some level forensics, vulnerability scanning, all of those things were brought in. And those, believe it or not, those are technologies that are all about automation. Those positions are being automated away. And so the technical skills that were in greatest demand, cloud, data protection, and identity and access management, those are areas that it makes it very difficult to automate away. And by the way, I'll still argue the empathy point. When we're talking about identity and access management and data protection, it requires a level of empathy to identify the right controls.
Yeah. Does the industry, I'm looking at figure 8, percentages of unfilled positions. Basically, there was 64% at the executive C-suite level or the CISO level, no issues. It seems to be a bit top-heavy at the moment. Do you think the industry's become a bit top-heavy of CISOs, senior cybersecurity managers, and they've all come through the ranks? And as cybersecurity's become more of an issue over the last decade or so,
I don't know, Chris,
that I would
say that Chris, I don't know that I would say it's becoming top heavy. I think it always has been because of how we've been recruiting and looking for, the proverbial unicorn who's done, 15 years of experience, in all these different technologies that are out there. And it speaks back to Jenai's point. There's a lot of great initiatives. People recognize that we need to get newer to the profession people. The problem right now, there's a couple different challenges with this, is if you talk to folks or know anybody who's got, kids that are under 20 years of age, a lot of them they just want to be consumers of technology, right? They really weren't interested in diving into this. And so we're being challenged to fix a problem in an overarching academic pipeline that starts much earlier than what we really have an influence on. And that's where you need to go back on. And, when I did my master's in workforce ed, I kind of dug into this. And listen, at the end of the day, in every region is a little different, and there's some really good success stories out there. But they're few and far between. But the common themes of anybody who's kind of quote unquote doing it right is they're looking at it as a system from early ed all the way into the workforce. You have to look at that, and traditionally we're a very reactive culture, right? And you look at like STEM just has not largely delivered on what it wanted because it was basically bolt on, and there were different ways. And Jenai did a great job, right? Kind of tearing apart the empathy aspect. It comes back to human sciences, and there's so much for us to learn from that. And unfortunately, trying to get different communities to work together becomes difficult, and it shouldn't be in today's day and age.
Well, look, I'll put it there as a one to watch for next year and see what that change is in around that. I think it might be also a call to action for the likes of, say, ISACA to sort of expand a little bit on the discussion within the industry on something like empathy and trust. The last one, and I'm just conscious of time as well, we could literally go all day. It's a pretty detailed report as well. We want the audience wanting more at the end of this. Figure 20, why cybersecurity professionals leave their jobs. So recruited by other companies, that's near 60%, then poor financial incentives, and then limited promotion and development opportunities. And the other one there is high work stress levels. So those are certainly a standout one for anyone struggling to retain staff. And then the other one is the following benefits that the employer offers: pays employee certification fees, flexible work hours, and pays employee certification maintenance. So that's things like training and professional development as well, should also be at top ones there. That was figure 21. And the last one we've just touched on is the top 5 security skills: cloud computing, data protection, identity and access management, incident response, and then DevSecOps as well. So like I said, let's keep the audience wanting some more. Let them go and have a look through the report. Anyone with a real, I always say, anyone with a real job would take interest in these reports as well, because the managing teams, and no doubt they've got staff turnover or their own sort of employee awareness that they need to take into consideration as well. So on that note, maybe a final comment and what the outlook is for the 2022-2023 period. What would be something you'll be watching out for over the next sort of 12 months? Maybe Jenai will open to you.
Let's see. So what do I think? What's my outlook? I guess I'd say a couple of things. One is I'm really interested, at seeing how we really dig in and start addressing the gap in human skills. Right now, the report says that, is my favorite part, that the way we're dealing with it is sending people to online training for communication skills, workforce, the kind of training events, and mentors. So if human skills are one of the biggest gaps that we have, throwing people at Udemy is not necessarily the way that we should be solving that problem. And so I think, I'd like to see how we really start addressing that gap in human skills. And then I'm also looking forward to seeing, how we start to change the makeup of the people in our industry as well.
Nice. And John, your sort of outlook or ones to focus on?
So I think the thing we need to keep tabs on is the retention piece. And listen, budgets are leveling, and it kind of depends on every company funds their human capital a little bit different. So, it might be you might get captured operationally or not. But I think that what we're going to see is the companies that are doing better are the ones that are getting more creative. And one of the statistics that you tied up on there, we were talking about, what companies are doing. So paying for certifications or paying for maintenance. The maintenance in that regard was to maintain the certification. So there was a quick opportunity and a quick win for enterprises to not only, hey, we'll pay for you to get the credential, but we're going to pay for you to maintain it too, because there was a gap between the two.
And that's getting your CPE points and attending events and learning those as well. And even the potential mentoring as well is also important. So Jenai, Marinkovic, great to have you back. And Jonathan Brandt, they're both in the US. I think Midwest, there you are, John. Is that right? And
I'm actually back on the East Coast. I moved back to the East Coast last year. So,
well, the Patriots give it away. And Jenai, you're in California as well with the lovely plants in the background. So it's great to see you both again. Like I said, we'll have the report link in the show notes. It's on the My Security Marketplace as well, with some references in the Australian Cybersecurity magazine. So thank you very much. Enjoy your day or your afternoon over there.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.